Always My Soulmate by Watermelon's Melon Felon. Chapter 25. Lapse. Victor. Ni. Commemorative photo? Victor didn't know at first, although he picked up on it pretty quickly. When he'd asked that of the other man, he'd felt a tug inside of him, as if the expression he'd received after saying such words wasn't new to him. Which was ridiculous because he was Victor Nikiforov, and whenever he offered a photo opportunity, people never turned him down. So why had it felt so disturbingly familiar? And why did the thought bother him so much? Deciding to put it from his mind, those hazel eyes widening in horror, Victor focused his attention on his coach. Yakov was going on about how Yuri needed to work on his presentation, and Victor took that as a chance to join in and finish what he'd wanted to say earlier. All thoughts of the disappointed Asian man fled from his brain. San. The sense of deja vu that had followed Victor around all morning had yet to cease, and he didn't fully understand it. It wasn't just a familiarity with the situation in general, several-time Grand Prix champion going through the motions of his usual performances. The same setting, but different place, every year. He'd gotten used to it after nearly 2 decades of it, but for some reason, it had felt like everything he did had already been done before. As if he was in a dream. Or he'd gotten so used to this routine that he was dreaming it ahead of time. When Victor stepped on the ice to perform Stami Vicino, he didn't feel the usual thrill at the sight of the crowd. The many faces staring down at him from their seats so many feet away. Even as he skated to perfection once again, he couldn't keep his mind off the fact that it was all so familiar. You won, Yuri told him in a grumble, and Victor stared up at the screen, his mind coming up with the numbers before his eyes actually landed on the score. Victor was quiet for the rest of the evening, contemplating everything closely. It was only when he'd offered a commemorative photo to the Japanese skater that he noticed something off. He should have gone wide-eyed and then walked away. Instead, Katsuki Yuri murmured a low "no" in response to Victor's offer. His eyes had been downcast, and he refused to look up as he departed, towing his luggage behind him. Victor went to bed that evening considering something he hadn't had to think about since he was a child. Soulmates. Yon. Victor was experiencing a lapse. Victor had honestly thought he never would, which was why he hadn't thought about it a lot in his lifetime. Living the same day over and over until you met your soulmate the right way was a legend that was born of truth. A strange happenstance that inspired so many novels and films, that made people sigh in frustration and long for love with everything in them. And Victor had been going through his own lapse for a few days, 3 or 4 at least. That was why everything had seemed so familiar, why everything got boring really quickly, why he had been able to predict his own score in everyone's words the former day. He'd already been through it all before. And the thing was, he had to meet his soulmate the right way. What was considered the right way? And out of everyone he'd met on the day he won the Sochi Grand Prix final, which one was his soulmate's? Victor sat up in his king-sized bed and grabbed his mobile from the bedside table. As expected, it was the same day again, meaning he had to skate Stami Vicino again and win again. Who had he met at the final? On the day of the men's singles free program, who did Victor Nikiforov meet for the first time? After all, he'd known quite a bit of the people he'd spoken to, so it was truly a small list. He opened the notepad on his mobile and proceeded to make said list. He'd have to watch those people the most. After all, he wasn't the only one going through a lapse. His soulmate was, and eventually, they too would notice and try to find him. Right? There was no change for 5 days. Q. Victor had begun paying so much attention to everyone around him that he finally noticed something different. Katsuki Yuri, the Japanese skater who was Victor's direct competition, didn't fall once in his routine like he had all the other times Victor had lapsed. Instead, he managed to stay on his feet, his anxiety showing a lot less this time. And instead of coming in last, with over 100 points below Victor, he came in 4th, with 70 points below Victor. His attention stayed focused on the other, and when the time came, Victor offered a commemorative photo again, just to gauge the other's reaction. He got an eye roll and a curt "no" as a reply. By now, he was absolutely certain that Katsuki Yuri was his soulmate. But that didn't mean he wasn't going to test him further. Nijushi. After determining who his soulmate was, Victor had spent his days either trying to capture the other's attention, and failing, or looking up information on the other. Katsuki Yuri. He was born in Hasetsu, Kyushu, a small town by the ocean, and its known landmark was a large castle that overlooked the land. He loved something called katsudan, practiced ballet long before he became a skater, and loved poodles. His Instagram showed a younger him holding a toy poodle as his profile photo. Yuri was a very talented skater, but he had anxiety issues that acted up during competitions. When not under pressure, he did extremely well. Victor could tell because he was steadily improving as the laps went by. Yuri seemed to be taking this as a chance to better himself as a skater, which was a good idea in all honesty. He was using the time wisely because how often did someone get 20 or so days to dedicate to their craft without it affecting every aspect of their lives? So if he wanted to become a better skater, then Victor was in full support of him. He was so close to kicking the third place medalist off the podium. He just needed a little more of a push. He realized that his PCS was already perfection and that he had to up his TES if he wanted to earn one of the medals. Slowly but surely, Victor got to watch as Katsuki Yuri was reborn as a new man on the ice, and he counted himself lucky to be able to witness it. But he was also possessive and was glad he was the only person who got to see how much his soulmate could grow when he had the time and the will to do so. Nijugo. Victor did not get a chance to offer to speak with Yuri this time. He disappeared from the rink altogether. Still, that didn't stop him from his plan to confront the other. He wasn't the type to accept defeat, after all. Victor didn't go down without a fight, and Yuri couldn't avoid him forever. Nijushichi. Yuri won bronze. He actually came out hard, and he won the bronze medal. Victor was not only pleased, but he was also proud. And this time he made sure that Yuri knew he was happy about it. "You did really well today," he told the other as they left the podium. The brunette stared at him in obvious shock. His mouth dropped open just the slightest bit. His cheeks were still flushed from how much effort he'd put into his performance. Victor would swear that his heartbeat sped up and he could practically feel it trying to burst from his chest. Yuri was so adorable. How had he not noticed? "You've improved a lot," Victor added, making sure that his grin was warm and friendly. And he didn't have to pretend with Yuri. The other naturally made him want to smile. A stilted nod was Yuri's response. Taking a deep breath, Victor placed a hand on the other's shoulder and leaned in, his lips brushing against the shell of Yuri's ear. "Next time, I expect you to be standing to my right." With a wink, Victor left the other to his thoughts. If he was correct, Yuri would take the challenge for what it was, and by tomorrow, he would be fondling a silver medal, standing exactly where he deserved to be. Niju-hachi. Victor's smile could fill angels, and he didn't care. His soulmate had managed to completely turn his Grand Prix final experience around. He'd done poorly the first time, but by the 28th time, he'd managed to pull himself together and give the world a show that he had always been capable of. He just needed the motivation and strength to pull it off. It had taken extra work and dedication, but Katsuki Yuri had pulled it off. To properly demonstrate his pride, Victor took hold of Yuri's medal and brought it up to his lips, placing a very telling kiss on the cool metal, not caring that the cameras were flashing in their faces. Yuri's face was flushed as a result, but he didn't push Victor away, so he probably didn't mind. "Congratulations, Yuri," the Russian purred, enjoying how the other reacted to him. "Thank you," the younger man stuttered, eyes sparkling just the slightest as he began to take deep breaths and slowly count to 3 over and over. While Yuri was preoccupied with calming himself down, Victor slipped a slim piece of paper into the other's hand and waited until those thin fingers closed over his own before letting go. "I'll call you," he murmured before sauntering off. He had a strong feeling that the next morning would be different, and it was a good thing he'd gotten Yuri's number off of Chris. Victor sat across from his soulmate, who had decided to skip the morning routines at the rink. The exhibition wasn't due until later, and both of them weren't required to be around before then. So Victor had called early that morning and whisked the other off for coffee so that they could officially get to know one another. "I just can't believe that you're my soulmate," Yuri murmured after a moment, voice full of wonder. "It's so hard to even fathom that the man I literally chased for 13 years and had all over my wall ended up being my perfect match." Well, Victor knew there was a story in there, and he indeed wanted to know it. He knew that this was not the time. He could be patient if it was worth it. And Katsuki Yuri was worth it. Now we get to find out just why we're each other's perfect match. A gorgeous flush. Yeah.